Let's bring back in our panel for their reaction. So we just heard Barbara, the protester there, and her emotional story. And then just before she made that comment, Jessie Jane, she also said that there needs to be military intervention in Cuba to fix the situation, similar to what Miami's mayor suggested the other day. He said we need to send troops in, but now he's also taking it a step further and suggesting airstrikes. What are your thoughts?
I'm rather shocked. I mean, here we are trying to get out of Iraq, trying to get out of Afghanistan, and then people just willy-nilly think that the military should just go intervene into Cuba. At this point, when the military intervention would have been justifiable was under the Kennedy administration, when we saw that the Soviets were intervening into Cuban politics. We didn't do it then. Here it is 60 years later. How could you justify this as a national security threat to the United States? That's the only time that the military should be intervening. We've had multiple countries across the world that have been influenced by communism, and we did not intervene. We saw that at least militarily. I appreciate and sympathize. There's so many other routes that the United States can go. We need to impose the tough sanctions again. We can have a military presence of sort, particularly those for refugees that may be trying to get off out of Cuba. But unfortunately, we have a Homeland Security chief that has turned around and said that we won't take them, or we won't take the Haitians. What happened? We're showing no support, and our government is showing a lackluster will to demonstrate that this is a communist society that has been dug down under into poverty. Instead, they're trying to suggest that Cuba is not so bad, and it's just due to, like was said earlier about the COVID crisis, that they didn't have enough vaccines. That's ludicrous.
Jesse, I want to stick with you briefly and then get to our panel a little bit, because you brought up the Kennedy administration. You know, we did have now the rumors, the word coming out of Russia, the word coming out of China, telling the U.S. to stay out of this Cuban business. It does start to feel a little bit like the 60s. Again, you talk about other steps outside of military actual interference or intervention, but what should some of those things be? Because we certainly need to have more support for the Cuban effort for freedom than what we've currently seen from this administration.
Well, this administration is just weak, period. I mean, they're not standing up to China. They're not standing up to Russia. In fact, they're in bed with all of this. So why would we expect them to suddenly get behind this revolution, potential revolution? We're not even supporting the people of Hong Kong. So where does it begin and where does it end? I empathize. This is a horrible situation. But this particular administration has already turned its back on so many other justifiable means throughout the world that we need to take a strong stance with. Instead, we're being bulldozed over. I just don't see how anybody can justify now having a military intervention in Cuba when we're not even standing strong in the world stage on other efforts. There is a lot. We must ensure that we have the sanctions. We've got to get our counterparts in South America and Central America to impose upon Cuba also. What about the regional forces that are located there? There's so much more than just always looking at the United States as the 911. Have we forgotten that we really haven't even won a war since World War II? How many American lives keep getting sucked into this when we don't have any plan, we don't have a withdrawal, and we don't see the long term of what our actions are going to have? We have constantly been drained, and American lives being lost in Cuba, just for me, would be very unsettling.
We only have about a minute left, but I want to get both of our other panelists in to make a comment on this. Ash, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, look, I completely agree with everything that Jessie said. I think she's dead on. This is not our fight. I mean, look, there may be steps that the administration could take, but why would we start taking these steps with Cuba? I do think, though, that ultimately, and I'll say this, is that I think this is a legacy moment and a legacy issue for Joe Biden. He lost Florida. They're going to need it again in 2024, and I think that's an issue that he can't ignore. I think he needs to go over there personally and try to sit down and try to make some corrections with them, try and, have intervention militarily with that refugees that are trying to get over the U.S. But ultimately, this is not our fight, and there's no value in military interaction.
Derrick, I was just going to say, I wonder what the Biden administration will do with sanctions, because it's viewed both ways, because you lift sanctions and the people who need the help the most don't necessarily receive it. So what do you think the Biden administration will do?
That's interesting, and that was going to be my point. I was wondering how this story is going to be spent politically. in terms of, because everything now is political. Is it the Dems versus Republicans? So it's just going to be interesting to see, because, you know, it's a crisis going on in Cuba right now. But again, it's not our fight. It's been going on for 62 years. But it's just going to be interesting to see how the whole thing is spun, whether it's going to be a fight versus Democrats and Republicans, and how Joe Biden responds, since he did lose that state so badly in the last election.
I mean, I think we see where the writing's on the wall. Apparently, Republicans want to defund police. Apparently, whatever happens in Cuba will likely be blamed on an orange man named Donald Trump, if you listen to the Democrats. But we're going to have our panel stand by, because coming up, an alarming new report revealing our naval officers are preoccupied with diversity training and are losing the military edge, the result of our Navy going woke. Next, when American Agenda continues after the break. You're watching Newsmax TV.